Title: White and Black, The Difference of Colors in the World of Justice. In a small, bustling town nestled between lush green hills and winding rivers, two lives intersected in a courtroom, each representing a world apart. One was Judge Arvind Sharma, a man of deep conviction, who had spent his life in pursuit of truth and justice. His skin was dark, a mark of his origins in a poor family that had struggled for generations. The other was Robert Collins, a wealthy businessman with fair skin and a life of ease. Robert's family had always lived in luxury, their wealth passed down through generations. He had never known hardship and viewed the world from the perspective of privilege. The story began when Robert was accused of exploiting workers on his estate. His employees, many of whom had been born into poverty, worked tirelessly on his land under harsh conditions. They had little to no rights, and Robert's wealth shielded him from any consequences. His family had owned the estate for decades, and it was widely believed that the law could never touch them. But the workers were determined to seek justice. They gathered evidence of Robert's cruelty, of the long hours they worked in unsafe conditions, of their wages being withheld and their voices silenced. With nowhere else to turn, they brought their case before the courts, hoping for a chance to be heard. The case caught the attention of the town, as it was more than just a legal matter, it was a fight for dignity, equality, and human rights. Judge Arvind was assigned to the case. As a man who had risen from the lowest rungs of society, he understood the pain of being oppressed. He had faced prejudice because of the color of his skin, and he knew how powerful and corrupt the wealthy could be. But he was also a man of unwavering integrity, committed to ensuring that the law served all people, regardless of their social status. In the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Robert's lawyer, a sharp and calculating man, used every tactic to undermine the workers' claims. He painted Robert as a benefactor, claiming that the workers were simply ungrateful for the opportunities he had given them. He argued that the living conditions on the estate were better than those of most rural workers, and that Robert had always paid them more than they deserved. Judge Arvind listened carefully, his face stoic, but his mind was racing. He had seen this pattern before: the rich, with their expensive lawyers, weaving tales of benevolence to hide their exploitation. But he was determined that justice would prevail. His eyes remained fixed on Robert, who sat with an air of arrogance, as if he could never truly be touched by the law. As the trial continued, the workers shared their stories. One spoke of how his family had worked on the estate for generations, only to see their wages taken away, leaving them to struggle to survive. Another worker described how she had been injured while working, and instead of receiving medical care, she had been dismissed with nothing. Their voices were filled with pain, but also with hope that finally, someone would listen. Judge Arvind was not unmoved by their stories. His own journey had been one of struggle. He remembered the days when he had been a young boy, unable to afford education, forced to work odd jobs just to eat. He had faced rejection because of his dark skin, and had been made to feel like he was less than others. But those experiences had shaped him, had built his resolve to one day become a man who could make a difference. He knew that the law was supposed to serve the people, not just the powerful. Late one evening, as the trial neared its final stages, Judge Arvind sat alone in his chambers, reflecting on the case. He could feel the weight of the decision ahead of him. He thought of the world in which Robert lived, where money and status could erase the consequences of cruelty. But he also thought of the workers, people whose lives had been shaped by years of suffering, and who now stood before him, waiting for a chance to be heard. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. The air was thick with anticipation. Robert sat confidently in the defendant's chair, his lawyer by his side. The workers, nervous but hopeful, sat on the other side, their faces etched with weariness but also determination. Judge Arvind stood, his voice calm but firm as he addressed the court. "Justice," he began, "is not a commodity that can be bought or sold. It is not determined by the color of one's skin, nor by the weight of one's pocketbook. It is determined by what is right, by what is fair, and by what is true. Robert Collins, your wealth and your skin may grant you privileges in society, but they do not grant you the right to exploit those who are weaker, those who depend on you for their livelihood. You may be a man of privilege, but today, you stand before the law as an equal." The room fell silent as Judge Arvind's words hung in the air. He continued, "I find you guilty of the charges against you, Robert Collins. You will pay reparations to the workers you have wronged, and you will be required to improve the conditions on your estate to ensure that no one else suffers as they have." Robert's face turned pale. He had never expected to be treated like this. He had always believed that his wealth and status would protect him from consequences. But in that moment, he realized that in the eyes of the law, he was no different from anyone else. The judge had delivered a verdict not based on his race or his wealth, but on the truth of his actions. As Robert left the courtroom, his mind raced. He could not comprehend what had just happened. For the first time in his life, he was being held accountable for his actions. But for the workers, it was a moment of triumph. They had fought not just for justice, but for recognition, for their dignity, and for a future where they would no longer be silenced. In the days that followed, Robert began to question his beliefs. He realized that wealth and power could not protect him from the consequences of his actions, and that true justice was not about who you were, but what you did. The workers, on the other hand, found themselves with a new sense of hope. They had fought against an unjust system, and through their perseverance, they had shown that no one, no matter their skin color, wealth, or social status, was above the law. Judge Arvin's decision sent a powerful message to the entire town: in the eyes of justice, there is no place for inequality. The law, as it should be, is blind to the colors of men and women, and it stands firm in its commitment to fairness for all. And so, the town began to change. The story of Judge Arvin's courage became legend, passed down from one generation to the next. It was a reminder that in the world of justice, the difference between black and white was not just a matter of skin color, it was a matter of what was right.